Bom dia, todos. Good day to all of you. This is a presentation of the Brazil-Minnesota Medtech Dialogue Series, organized by the Consulado Geral do Brasil in Chicago. It is being presented today on the platform. It is being presented today by the Minnesota Connect, the channel of the Brazil-Minnesota Chamber of Commerce. The Brazil-Minnesota Chamber of Commerce is dedicated to promoting cultural, social, education, and commercial relations between Minnesota and Brazil. I'm Jeffrey Hansen, the president of the organization, but I would like to recognize specifically another board member, Isabel Gomes, who was really the one at the chamber who organized the support of this event. As part of this mission, it's just interesting to note that last week we celebrated the first official Brazil Day in Minnesota based on the declaration of Governor Tim Walz as September 30th every year being Brazil Day in Minnesota. And now on the commercial side of things, we're happy to facilitate a Medtech dialogue series. The Medtech series is post-pandemic scenarios and private-public cooperation, opportunities, and challenges. In this, we have several different people speaking and talking with you. The first one we would like to present, and who will speak on behalf of Brazil, from the Brazilian Ministry of Health, we have Dr. Helio Angotti Neto. He is the National Secretary of Science, Technology, Innovation, and Health Strategic Products. Dr. Helio, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the kind invitation to speak at this event. In the name of our Minister Marcelo Queiroga and our President Jair Messias Bolsonaro. Brazil has changed in so many ways. We have risen from past decades of corruption and inefficiency, with a crumbling healthcare system to face a global crisis all around the world. In our favor, we had what is most precious to a nation, our hard-working and creative people, and our moral values. As one former senator from Netherlands, Hoyle Kuiper, reminds us, a crucial element for any nation is its moral capital, that is, the accumulation of values and virtues that generate crucial characteristics for real innovation and economic prosperity, freedom, creativity, integrity, and intelligence. As Alain Perfit reminds us, without trust, there will be no progress. And we had in the past an environment of great instability and mistrust in the government and in our nation, assailed by old ideas that are anachronistic and harmful to any innovative enterprise. The trust that is being regained in our country today creates an environment of predictability in which investors can trust and invest. Since the beginning of 2019, we have been without any concrete cases of corruption. We want a safe environment for business, research, and innovation. We have a people who believe in God, respect the Constitution, value the family and freedom, and are concerned with education and innovation, elements that guarantee the sustainability necessary for a nation that seeks to innovate and grow, actually contributing to a better quality of life for its population and other countries too. Our state-owned companies had losses of billions of dollars in previous years. Today, they are profitable. We believe in economic freedom in an environment of trust and the boost that this gives to creativity, entrepreneurship, and innovation. Brazil has the largest investment partnership program with the private sector in its history. So far, $100 billion of new investments have been contracted. We have everything investors are looking for, a huge consumer market, excellent assets, a tradition of respect for contracts, and trust in our government. Our modern and sustainable low carbon agriculture feeds more than 1 billion people in the world and uses only 8% of national territory. Brazil has 8.5 million square kilometers, of which 66% are native vegetation, the same since its discovery in year 1500. In the Amazon biome alone, 84% of the forest is intact, housing the greatest biodiversity on the planet, a great reservoir for research and innovation. The Amazon region alone is equivalent to the area of all Western Europe, just to have it in mind. Brazil is already an example in sustainable energy generation, with 83% coming from renewable sources. It was this environment of responsibility, sustainability, and combating corruption in a great quest for good governance that helped our people to face the pandemic. Despite all the deaths and suffering, our people answered the calling, as did our industrial complex and our researchers. We have had many heroes in recent years, and without a doubt, many of them have worked investing in Brazil, trusting, innovating, researching, and generating jobs. Seeking economic freedom never means abandoning those who are in difficulties. To help our people against COVID 19, we provided $800 emergency relief to 68 million people in 2020. I remember that we ended 2020, the first year of the pandemic, with more formal jobs than in December 2019, thanks to the action of our government with programs to maintain jobs and income that cost us around $40 billion. From January to July this year, approximately 1.8 million new jobs were created, and our growth for 2021 is estimated at 5%, reversing a downward trend observed in our country's recent past. So far, the federal government has distributed more than 260 million doses of vaccines, and more than 140 million Brazilians have already received at least the first dose, which represents almost 90% of the adult population. 80% of the indigenous people has also been fully vaccinated. Until November, everyone who chooses to be vaccinated in Brazil will be assisted. This was possible thanks to the transfer of technology between Fiocruz and AstraZeneca and international efforts to acquire the vaccine, including large companies such as Pfizer, Janssen, and Sinovac together with Butantan in São Paulo. Economic partnerships between national and international companies put Brazil in a position not only to produce for domestic needs, but also to export vaccines to other countries in the near future, guaranteeing quick access to health solutions. From a country with high levels of corruption and inefficiency that we received in the recent past, today we have a country that was able to react, showing the unity of those who support the good of our people. Our health industrial complex answered by increasing its pharmaceutical production, creating technological solutions, and providing equipment to serve the most severely ill patients with COVID 19. In 2020, we launched the National Program for Precision Health and Genomics, with the goal of creating the largest multi ethnic genomic bank on the planet, in addition to the development of precision healthcare and advanced therapies in one of the largest and most complex public healthcare systems in the world, our SUS. We invest in partnership with the private sector through institutions such as Embrapi, the Brazilian Company for Research and Industrial Innovation, which mobilized resources with the support of the Brazilian government to invest in dozens of projects to fight COVID 19, rapid tests, respirators, and personal protective equipment. We also invested in innovation and research in the field of immunobiological products, rare diseases, neglected diseases, advanced therapies, telehealth, technology transfer, and information technology to improve our healthcare system. These are just small examples of hundreds of actions involving research, innovation, and modernization of our industry and agribusiness. Merit of a people who want a better country and a government that respects this and seeks a prosperous future. Brazil lives now times and endure new times. Lives new times and endure thanks to those who put their creativity, will, and intelligence in search of a better future and the present of great achievements with stability. Thank you for your attention, and may God help us to go through these great challenges that we are living now and come out of this great crisis even better than before. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Elio. We appreciate your words and direction. Now, we'd like to bring on Gabriela Gerbau from the Minnesota Trade Office. She is the Executive Director and also the Minnesota Chief Protocol Officer. Welcome, Gabrielle. We look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you, Jeff, and the Brazil-Minnesota Chamber of Commerce, and of course, thank you, Secretary Angotti, for your remarks. Just to give you a little bit of background and history, Minnesota medtech innovations don't start just 50 or 100 years ago. They started in the late 1800s when the Mayo Clinic doctors began developing new technologies to better treat patients, which has been literally a logo in our state. There are so many important innovations that you probably know about, including the first portable pacemaker or the first open heart surgery, everything from the 3M bandages to the Medtronic AEDs. Minnesota's medical technology history is so impressive that it's been even featured in a permanent exhibit in the Smithsonian in the U.S. National Museum in Washington, D.C. And there is always more innovation coming because remember, we have more than 1,000 healthcare companies in Minnesota in an area that is the same land size as the state of Sao Paulo with a population of the city of Rio de Janeiro, just to give you some kind of different perspective on our industry. So whatever you are and whatever you do, either your life or the life of someone you love has been improved by technology developed, manufactured, or sold by our state medtech sector. Talking about a little bit of the last 2 years and how this COVID-19 and how our med sector has responded to this pandemic. You know, the COVID-19 pandemic demonstrated the close relationship that the public and the private sectors have in Minnesota. Really, public authorities and private companies quickly came together to secure enough PPE and, of course, ventilators to allow healthcare providers to work safely and for the patients to receive the best treatment possible. Minnesota companies team up with our government to develop the vaccine and also to deliver the vaccine. But perhaps there is something that is not so known out there, and it's Minnesota Logistics Company, along with Minnesota's cooling companies, were the ones to create the cold supply chain that allowed the vaccines to get out safely to the public. And I guess that thinking about it, we're kind of experts in cold, so it would have made kind of sense that we were the ones developing it. But anyway, just a kind of a fun fact that I like to remind if we can bring something positive out of that. So really, Minnesota is open for business. Every year we see more foreign-based companies located in Minnesota. We've seen huge investments from Philips in the Netherlands, from DiaSorin, from Olympus. We work with governments of Denmark and Quebec, which are very strong in medtech technology, and we understand how solutions are going to be global and are actively looking to create new relationships to address the challenges we face. The Trade Office, which is my office, composed by 11 professionals, what we do literally is we help to bring Minnesota to the world and the world to Minnesota. We help companies export to the world and we attract foreign investment. And of course, as Jeff mentioned very nicely, we are the protocol officers of the state. In any case, I truly thank you for joining us today, and I hope that you enjoyed this great program and the outstanding panelists in the agenda. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gabrielle, and through you and that, want to thank the Minnesota Trade Office for the wonderful support on these international relationships and in this event also. And now we would like to move on to the coordinator of our panel discussion, Stephen Bips. He is the President, Global Strategies and Analysis at AdviMed, who is helping organize this overall event. So, Stephen, the word is yours with our great panel. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Good morning and good afternoon to everyone. Bom dia, boa tarde. Before we begin our panel discussion, I'd first like to thank Consul General Benoni Belli for the leadership, the focus, and the personal engagement in both making this webinar series a reality, but also in actively promoting strengthened ties between Brazil and the United States, including Minnesota. Benoni is a longtime supporter in this relationship, and we in Minnesota and in the medtech sector are very appreciative of the attention he and the consulate and the Brazilian government as a whole have given us as partners. So a special thanks to you, Benoni. I'd also like to thank the Brazil-Minnesota Chamber of Commerce and the Minnesota Trade Office for helping to realize today's session as an important installation in this series. My name is Stephen Bipes. I'm Vice President at AdvaMed, the Advanced Medical Technology Association, and I lead all of AdvaMed's work with Brazil and broader Latin America. AdvaMed itself is a trade association whose members include more than 400 manufacturers of life-saving and life-improving medical technologies, and these companies range from the largest to the smallest innovators. In fact, 70% of these companies in the global medtech supply chain are small and medium-sized enterprises, and many of them are based in Minnesota and Brazil. And although AdvaMed and my office are based in Washington, D.C., I myself am a Minnesota native, now based in Minneapolis, again, after having spent the past 20 years in Washington, D.C., São Paulo, and Rio de Janeiro. So today is a special day for me in several aspects. First, it's my birthday, celebrating a half century. But before you say I'm crazy to be working and doing a webinar today, first know that this is my last engagement before taking off the rest of the day and the week with various planned activities with my family. But today is also special because it is truly an honor to have been invited to participate in this event, which really brings together the threads and goals of my professional and personal lives in a unique way. I've always wanted to work at the nexus of the US and Brazil, the nexus of public and private sectors, and I've been fortunate to have done that now for over 2 decades. But in my function today, I'm also able to bring together and highlight the work that we are doing in the medtech sector and the connection to Minnesota and Brazil. And we could even contemplate doing additional webinars in Portuguese. Seria prazer reconduzir essa sessão e fazer outros com vocês. But today we'll be doing it in English. So we have a very interesting panel session today, and I'm eager to kick it off. With us for the panel are our following distinguished guests from both the private and public sectors. Dr. Paulo Gadelha is the 2030 Agenda Coordinator and former president of the Oswaldo Cruz Foundation, Fiocruz. Dr. Cristiane José Jordan Gomes is director of the Brazilian National Health Surveillance Agency, Anvisa. Dr. Trevor Gunn is vice president for international relations with Medtronic. And Ben Wright is vice president for 3M Ventures. We'll begin with Dr. Gadelha and then move on to Dr. Gunn, Dr. Gomez, and then Mr. Wright. But I first wish to briefly set the stage and then launch the points for some of the conversation. So we're in the middle of a global pandemic, and the medtech and public sectors are working together to respond to it and recover from it. The level of public-private cooperation has never been stronger, and even the World Health Organization has recognized that the response and results achieved to date would not have been possible without close collaboration that needs to be fostered and strengthened moving forward. The pandemic stressed global supply chains and provided indicators of where it can and needs to be strengthened and made more resilient. The medtech supply chain is orders of magnitude more complex than that for medicines, with a typical device containing between 2,000 and 200,000 components that can change every 18 months. There is no country in the world today that does or can vertically manufacture all of the inputs required for a single medical device, but theoretically, if it could, it would be at a cost that could otherwise have treated 10 patients instead of 1. And the ecosystem that surrounds or undergirds this global medtech supply chain is multifaceted. First and most important is the health environment and the common goal of maximizing patient access to health. But diagnosing that, there are the aspects of the global customs and trade facilitation infrastructure, the global regulatory infrastructure. There's the broader trade and tax environment. There's the investment and capital environment. There's the global government procurement benchmarks. There's payment and reimbursement policy, where health technology incorporation and value-based care have an increasingly important role. There's R&D and innovation and other areas. There's much to consider, and I think the diversity of expertise gathered here today can help shed some light on these aspects. So with that introduction, I'll ask each of our panelists to present for a maximum of 10 minutes each, not feeling burdened to fill the full 10. We'll go through and come back for some Q&A. The organizers are going to kick my shin under the virtual table if I don't keep you all on time, so I've committed to doing so. So Dr. Gadelha, thank you for joining us today. We're very interested in your views on these subjects. The virtual floor is yours.
Thanks, Stephen, and happy birthday.
Thank you.
Well, on behalf of Nida Trindade, President of Fiocruz, I would like to express our pleasure and gratitude to Benoni Belli, Consul General of Brazil in Chicago, for the invitation to participate in the US Medtech Dialogue Series, and salute Elio Angotti, a Brazilian Health Ministry Secretary of Science and Technology and Innovation from my health ministry, to which Fiocruz is linked. Jeffrey Hansen, President of Brazil Minnesota Chamber of Commerce, and Gabrielle Gerbeau, Executive Director and Minnesota Chief Protocol Officer of Minnesota Trade Office. I also like to say hello to my co-panelists in this session, Trevor and Ben. COVID-19 represents a major systemic hazard with disruptive effects on the economy, society, and health, which are deeply rooted in the unsustainable prevailing model of global development. The global death toll of 4.55 million, the physical and psychological sufferings of billions of people, and the economic impact on health service and chain of supplies represented a huge impact on health public perception and healthcare. There is a completely new field of integrated care for systemic chronic effects of COVID-19 and a huge challenge to cope with a third wave of invisible patients, which were left behind during the pandemics. Data from the Ministry of Health showed that in the period of January to July of last year, there was a reduction of 1.1 million elective healthcare as compared to the same period in 2019, leading to a regression of 12 years on these values. Main areas such as oncology, transplants, mental health, and child and maternal care were deeply affected. According to Eugenio Vilaça, a leading Brazilian public health expert, two other features are highlighted. First, an exponential increase in technical incorporation, rise from 50 to 175 times in the case of telemedicine. Second, an extensive change in regulatory patterns. Medicare and Medicaid introduced from March to September 2020 more than 190 new regulations valid both for the pandemic and post-pandemic period. As main organization features, there is a trend on decentralized care, direct connection between providers and individuals, a strong use of digital health, and reinforcement of managed care. A striking effect of the COVID-19 pandemic was also to highlight that health is a significant anchor for shaping a sustainable and inclusive economic recovery. Health is a collective individual right that articulates social and development policy, combining growth, innovation, equity, and social inclusion. It is one of the most dynamic areas of development, generating mass consumption, employment, investment, innovation, and it is a structuring factor of the social welfare state. Health was also a privileged field for innovation in all major technological trends and respond for 10% of global expenditure. These features, however, have never become a serious concern for applying a systemic approach connecting health, innovation, well-being, and inclusive development. Innovative policies and all of the government approach should mobilize STI within health systems and articulate in a win-win fashion the productive base of the health economic industrial complex to social and health priorities. In the last 2 decades, Brazil experienced a promising case that should be noticed. The overall dynamic of science and innovation and the model of a UN technological facilitated mechanism, quote, harnessing STI to SDGs, were deeply challenged by COVID-19, especially in the interface of science, society, and policies. Together of reinforcing that robust national system of innovations are paramount for overcoming a major socio-economic crisis, mission-oriented innovation and the role of the entrepreneurial state were much valued, while fast-track policies enhance the innovation ecosystem. On the other hand, notwithstanding the strong support for research and innovation related to the pandemic, there was a reduction of funding and several constraints on a wide scope of research activity. Just to mention a case related to cooperation between Fiocruz, Dr. Rifat Atum, and Medtronic, here represented, the projects of Goiânia and Ceará State for value-based assessment for diabetes treatment, which could be the initial step for a broader area of collaboration, was discontinued. The health sector, with whose leadership, designed a comprehensive approach to STI linked to 2030 Agenda's TFM principles: mission-oriented innovation, evidence-based policies, open science, genomics and data sharing, common platforms for R&D, regulatory, procurement, governance, and deployment innovations. WHO Blueprint, the Solidarity Clinical Trial, CEPI, and COVAX are striking examples. This process is, although fraught with great contradictions. The speed of innovation, bringing to market safe and effective vaccines in an amazing one-year time span, was coupled on the negative side with the war on vaccines, which opposed values of vaccines as commodities to vaccines as common goods. Inequity is also much related to emerging technologies and Industry 4.0. As highlighted by UNCTAD's 2021 Technology and Innovation Report, very few countries create the technologies that drive this revolution, but all will be affected by it, and almost none are well prepared for their consequences. The issue of emerging technologies is thus crucial to future prospects of inclusive healthcare. The interaction of these technologies with the health field has specificities that greatly influence their deployment: dependence on health professions and organizations, strong role of governments and regulatory mechanisms, non-linear relation between innovation and health costs, hard, soft, and social technology are closely intertwined, and technological incorporation management plays a crucial role. Most relevant, technological breakthroughs, biopharmaceutical, personalized medicine, device, etc., with high aggregate value usually leads to increasing inequality. The lessons learned from the connection of STI to 2030 Agenda and the integration between health and STI sectors during the pandemics should provide inputs for shaping international cooperation. This general framework to address STI is very dear to Fiocruz, who adopted 2030 Agenda and STI for SDGs as a main reference for its institutional development. Fiocruz was born in 1900 with the mission of reinforcing the role of STI in a state agency to bring a virtuous relation between health and development. It is linked to the health ministry and has a unique institutional setup of problem-driven mission, vertical innovation chain, and a wide scope of activities, such as research, capacity building, vigilance, production of vaccines, pharmaceuticals, and diagnostics, science and health communication, and education. In many ways, Fiocruz may be seen as an innovation ecosystem, providing important leverage for both vertical innovation and cooperation in all aspects of the systemic components of innovation process. These special features and support of the health ministry and philanthropy have been central to Fiocruz's capacity to deal with health crisis and showed its full potential during the COVID-19 pandemic. Highlights from this response includes a boost of testing capacity for COVID-19 with 2 new analytical centers, which led Fiocruz to respond for around 40% of total Brazilian RT-PCR public testing. The construction in a record time of 50 days of a permanent infectious disease hospital with 195 intensive care beds, the second largest in the country, with over 4,500 patients treated since its opening on May 2020. Full tech transfer and production until the last month of more than 101 million doses of Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine for the National Immunization Program, which showcased the win-win model for the health industrial complex policies. Using the buying power of health ministry to address social needs through a private-public partnerships that guaranteed important market sharing for leading innovative private enterprise, while strengthening the innovation productive base of the universal health system. While considering possibilities of private-public cooperation in Brazil, it will be important to have in mind this broader framework, prioritize initiatives that contribute to strengthen the national innovation system, and in the case of health, the values and missions of our universal health system. Preparedness for post-COVID depends on previous technological and productive bases that supports the area of vigilance and integrated healthcare. New pandemics and other significant health hazards will certainly come, and they cannot be met by improvising crisis measures. In the last decade, Brazil has evolved in terms of the STI normative framework, which favors the possibility of cooperation between public institutions of STI with private innovation and industrial enterprises. In the case of Fiocruz, I'd like to mention just two experiences, which are exemplars of these new directions. The first is the Eusébio Health Innovation District project, which has been developed with the state of Ceará, with strong connection with the private sector, in which Fiocruz is the main anchor, with areas research, R&D, health service, and industrial production. The second one showcased the association of Fiocruz Paraná Biomolecular Institute with 7 other institutes of science, technologies, and industries under the umbrella of the Portugal government's CoLab initiative. CoLabs are linked to the National Plan for the Post-COVID Recuperation and Resilience Union, which aims to build national capacity for more autonomous production of health inputs and to foster European development. Finally, just to remind that COVID is a great tragedy, but it is also an opportunity to reshape the world. In the words of the International Science Council, the pandemic gave us the science and innovation community the chance to, quote, press reset and reimagine the future of science as an open public enterprise. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Gadelha, and we certainly look to engage you in the Q&A to follow up on some of those insights. Thank you very much. I'd now like to turn to Trevor Gunn from Medtronic. Trevor, whereas I'm the LATAM desk at AdvMed, you're the world desk at Medtronic and always about 10 steps ahead of me. And so I'm glad to have you with us for this conversation to help highlight select themes and or to connect the dots between the themes and to help put U.S.-Brazil into a global context regarding MedTech. Over to you.
Well, thank you, Stephen. And first of all, happy birthday.
Thank you.
The big 50 is not a small date. And it's really nice that your family let you participate with us, Sir Stephen. But I also wanted to talk to Consul General Benoni Bedley, who has been really the architect of this since the very beginning with our colleagues from Minnesota. We work with a lot of diplomats around the world, but I would say that Benoni, you've really distinguished yourself here. You're working at a very high level. We understand that, but you've also been able to work with us all on a very practical level. And at the end of the day, medical technology, we're pretty practical people. We can't solve an issue. Why are we working on the issue? And I would really say thank you very much to the Consul General and the colleagues there and hardworking colleague there in Chicago. And we're very proud to be in Minnesota as a part of your consular district. So, of course, we'd like to thank our colleagues at the embassy here as well, which have been really providing constant support for us, even where I'm actually physically located, which is here in Washington. I had 3 main points that I want to talk about, just a little bit more about the collaboration that we have in Brazil, and just to really thank, first of all, our colleagues at Anvisa. It's been, I've seen Anvisa over a much longer period of time, and I must say, as an external party to Anvisa, we've seen many, many very positive changes. An organization that was young and was learning, as the medical technology industry is also learning, but we were learning alongside each other, and we're extremely, extremely pleased with Anvisa and proud to call Anvisa our regulator in Brazil. I would also say that our colleagues at Itamaraty, one of the finest diplomatic services in the world, and the very, very strong training that the colleagues from Itamaraty get is always evident, no matter if we're working with Brazilian diplomats in Brasilia or in New York or in this case in Chicago. Wherever we go, this is remarkable, step. Really in their way of working, and we really, really appreciate all the support that they continue to give us and collaborate. And of course, there are other Brazilian agencies that are involved, and Dr. Gadelha will know, and Dr. Neto will also know that under the PDP regime of many, like Abraidi, ABDI, of course, then the Ministry of Health, and specifically Dr. Neto's part of the Ministry of Health played a really critical role in supporting our sector. Next, I want to just talk a little bit about medical technology and maybe a bit more about Medtronic in Brazil and our vision. I think that most here on the call know that Medtronic is the largest in the medical technology industry. But I think we're very, very proud of what we had in Brazil. And we used to, by the way, have before a merger with Covidien, part of our company had a CEO from Brazil. And it's very, very evident to us that how much we love Brazil, how much we're actually directly participating in Brazil. We have, production in Brazil, electrosurgery and sutures. And I'm sorry, I'm not a Portuguese speaker, but São Sebastião de Paraíso in Minas Gerais state, we have some production. Ribeirão Preto in Sao Paulo, also we have some production there. And this is all in addition to our office that we have in Sao Paulo. So that oversees all of our businesses. And we have colleagues from that office, Igor Zanetti, and Claudia Brabata and other colleagues on the call with us, working this every day. What I really want to bring home, and I think, Stephen, you were mentioning this, maybe even Gabrielle earlier on, is to not delude ourselves to think that this is just a big industry with big players like us. That's wrong. We see it every day. Small and medium-sized companies, and that are maybe even listening to this call today, are really the heart of our industry. And they're the heart of, I think, what is potentially the future of Brazil. And giving that type of support that, even organizations that have worked long and hard at innovation in Brazil are really critical partners here. We will work alongside them. We're very, very happy to see Brazilian innovation reaching global markets, and we really salute that. So in addition to what I said about our commitment to Brazil, we really applaud the Brazilian government's focus on those small, medium-sized enterprises, where a doctor in the middle of a surgery can literally have an idea, go to a friend that's an engineer, and start a company and think about the world and how you can take that technology really to the world. Very important for us to see that. I think there was a question about how we've also, that is Medtronic and maybe our industry, has responded to COVID-19. Dr. Gadea, you very eloquently spoke to this topic. Obviously, you understand we're also the largest producer globally of respiratory technologies. We're the third largest producer of ventilators. But even, we did what we could through this, and we're still doing exactly what we can, despite all the supply chain challenges still occurring all over the world, which mean that even a couch that we want to get here into the United States may take 5 months before you get that couch in the United States. You can imagine the component manufacturers that we're depending on are really critical pieces of this. So when I say that we expanded our production of ventilators by 5 times during this crisis, that's not a small thing. We also, I think many of our colleagues in Brazil know that we also, as Medtronic, did something quite unique, and is that we shared intellectual property with the world, with academic institutions, NGO, anybody that would like it. It was not without limitations. There were a few small limitations, time-based limitations, and when, again, the WHO decided that the crisis was over, that license would also expire. But what that led to is a whole different discussion around the world about what's possible. And I know our colleagues in Brazil feel the way that we do. And what has happened for us is that we have actually interesting strategic relationships in many emerging countries that we're actually producing, or those companies, be it Canada, be it Vietnam, be it Bangladesh, other countries are actually had, really, some had early stage plans, some are actually doing it right now. And I also say, Brazil is one of these countries that really enjoys and appreciates the international order. So the United Nations and how the international organizations all responded, we worked very closely with them. In fact, during this crisis, we actually founded a partnership. Helped to found a partnership between GMTA, the Global Medical Technology Alliance, and the WHO called the Global Respiratory Partnership. That's co-chaired by a colleague from an endocrinologist who's a chief advisor to the WHO Director General, and our former CEO of Medtronic, Dr. Omar Shrock. So very interesting and unique things that probably wouldn't have been. One thing I want to just convey to our Brazilian friends and those that may be interested in helping us to succeed and to make further contributions is we're very open to PPPs. I was very much involved in some of our discussions we've had in Brazil around those different types. Whatever the designation today and whatever the word that we're using, we see ourselves as a partner of the public healthcare system of Brazil. We see ourselves as a partner of public health. Finally, just three small points around Brazil. I want to just again salute the progress that we've seen in Anvisa particularly, but also the Ministry of Health around the global best practices, which GRP, adhering to good regulatory practices and seeing that those are really, I know, Stephen, if we leap off the track, you'll get us back on that particular point. We've seen increasing global participation in IMDRF, which is very, very important for us. Brazil did not participate very willingly in the predecessor organization, but now we see Brazil much more taking a leadership role, and we're very, very thankful for that. We're also very thankful for the fact that at a very high level that Brazil and U.S. have a trade agreement, and even over the past couple of years have been negotiated. We realize it needs the proper authorizations by our respective parliamentary organizations in order to make it effective. And then finally, something that Brazil feels very strongly about, that we feel very strongly about, is universal health care. And Dr. Guerrero made mention of these sustainable development goals, which are incredibly important. Quite frankly, right now in COVID-19, sometimes people forget about these, but we don't forget about these at Medtronic. 3.8 is universal healthcare. That's sustainable goal 3.8. 2 years ago, our CEO and chairman, Dr. Omar Ishrak, was the only private sector speaker, alongside the Argentinian healthcare minister at that time, and now the WTO Director General, and then Helen Clark at the United Nations when we celebrated universal healthcare. And we at Medtronic, both in Brazil and globally, are very much dedicated to continuing this fight for dignity and access to technology around the world. Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you, Trevor, and we likewise look forward to engaging you in the Q&A and following up on some of the points that you raised there. Thank you for that. I'm going to turn now to Anvisa and get the view from Dr. Cristiane Gomes, but first wish to tee up for the audience some information regarding Anvisa and our work with the agency that may not be readily obvious. First is that the agency has a commission structure with each of the directors serving in an independent function in what English we would call a commissioner. And Cristiane is one of the 5 independent Anvisa agency directors or commissioners, and in her case, the 3rd directorate, which is in charge of both the medical products division, GGTPS, but also the agency's regulatory process division, GGHEG. And so in that regard, we've been working with her and her teams on the implementation of good regulatory practices. And we really need to recognize the significant progress and leadership that Anvisa has in this regard. Not just helping medical devices and not just as a good reference agency, but I would say amongst all of the regulatory agencies in Brazil, Anvisa is at the front of them, and also a regional and global reference. As Trevor mentioned, Anvisa is the only member regulatory body for medical devices from Latin America that's in the management committee of the IMDRF, the International Medical Device Regulators Forum. And so we very much look forward to the continued collaboration and the further and deepening of good regulatory practices. So with that, I'll pass it over to Dr. Cristiane. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Cristiane Jourdan, endocrinologist and the health manager. And since November 2020, I'm one of the directors at the Brazilian Health Regulatory Agency, Anvisa. On behalf of Anvisa, I'd like to thank Consulate of Brazil in Chicago for the invitation to participate at the 2021 Brazil-US Medtech Forum. I'm glad to be here and talking about Anvisa's experience. Before I start my presentation, I'd like to express my sympathy to all the victims and families of coronavirus disease, COVID-19. In these difficult times, healthcare systems are under significant pressure, struggling to have access to strategic health products such as medicine, vaccines, and medical devices. This is one of the reasons why it's so relevant to discuss strategies to improve access to health products. Allow me to put the presentation. Everyone sees?
Yes.
Now I'm going to talk about regulation of medtech industry and price monitoring process, assessment of its impact and the path ahead. No. First of all, I'm talking about legal and regulatory framework of the medical device industry in Brazil. Medical device must be authorized through one of two authorization regimes, depending on the risk classification, notification or registration. The notification regime is applicable to products of risk class 1 and 2. In this regime, the renewal is not required. It's based on the application of a simplified technical file that must be maintained by the holder of the notification. The requirements of good manufacturing practice must be followed by the manufacturer. However, there is no need for certification of good manufacturing practice. The registration scheme is applicable to risk class 3 and 4. The registration is valid for 10 years. This is a rule that was changed in mid-2018. The registrations must be renewed. In this regime, a complete technical dossier must be submitted for review by the agents. The certification of good manufacturing practice is mandatory. The submissions must be placed by national factories or by importers that will represent the international manufacturer. Certifications of good manufacturing practice must be obtained for the final decisions on registration. In both schemes, authorization numbers are generated and must be available on the external labeling of the products. These authorization numbers allow users to search the Anvisa website for the validity for registration of a product. The submission structure for medical devices are described and aligned with IMDRF documents. As for the origin of medical device authorized for the Brazil market, approximately 30.9% of the products authorized for the Brazilian market are of national origin, and 69.1% of these products are important. United States represent the origin of a large proportion of the authorizations of important medical devices that are authorized with Anvisa. One of Anvisa's main strategies for regulation medical devices is regulatory convergence. Anvisa participates in the main medical device regulatory forums in the world, including the International Medical Device Regulatory Forum, the Medical Device Single Audit Program, the International Standards Organization, the International Electrotechnical Commission, the World Health Organization. Anvisa also maintains bilateral agreements with national regulatory agencies in several countries to share information of sanitary and regulatory interests. Reliance mechanisms are another important strategy for Anvisa. During the SARS-CoV-2 COVID-19 pandemic, Anvisa prioritized the analysis of all petitions related to strategic products for combating the pandemic, such as test kits, pulmonary ventilators, respirators, masks, and individual protection equipment. The registration and notification of strategic medical devices for pandemic emergencies could now be based on documents issued by regulatory authorities participating in the IMDRF. The extraordinary importation of products not registered with Anvisa that have been licensed by specific regulatory authorities was allowed for 108 days, and this regulation was renewed more than once during the pandemic emergency. Within the scope of inspections for certification of good manufacturing practice, Anvisa started working with remote inspections to cover emergency needs. All of these initiatives were aimed at minimizing the time for essential medical devices to reach the market. Now I'm going to talk about price monitoring of medical device. I'd like to start with the context that led the strategy we adopt in Brazil to monitor the prices of medical devices. In 2012, we performed a survey about the price of medical device in different regions of the country and for different health insurance plans. The first table shows the prices for the same products in hospitals located in 5 different regions of Brazil. There was a difference of 2.5 times between the price charged in São Paulo and Ceará for the same product, which was a catheter. The second table shows the price for the same products between different health insurance plans. In this case, the difference between the maximum and minimum price reached more than 500% for the same hip prosthesis. So Anvisa began to understand more deeply the medical device market in 2006, when it started to demand a report with economic information at the moment of a medical device registration. In 2015, a TV report called the Prosthesis Mafia gained wide national repercussion. Also in 2015, parliamentary inquiry committees, CPI, were instituted in the Senate and the House of Representatives and an interministerial working group composed by 5 ministries to address the issue. In 2017, the Federal Court of Accounts, Brazil, TCU, ordered Anvisa to take some measures, including the implementation of medical device price monitoring. In the same year, Anvisa began studies to develop a proposal for the implementation of price monitoring. We conducted a study in 2017 to understand the possible causes and consequences of these price distortions. As a result, we found multiple causes and market with great dysfunctionality. The main consequence of this dysfunctionality were the increase in costs of health insurance plans and for the Brazilian public health system, SUS, which directly affects the population access to health. We know that this is a worldwide problem, especially in low and middle income countries. Among the multiple causes identified, Anvisa decided to act on information asymmetry. On the next slide, you can see the strategies Anvisa established to reduce information asymmetry, which includes greater price transparency and better information about the products. We expect to develop a solution to compare similar products, to establish a price benchmark for public and private health insurance purchase, and to ensure the identification of products available on the market that attend patients' needs. To achieve this goal, the proposal was to define medical device by their attributes. To evaluate the feasibility of the proposal, a pilot project was made with coronary stents. On the next slide, we can see the result of this work. This is a panel where the user can search products by their attributes and access price statistics and a list of products available on the market. The panel displays price benchmarks through public procurement, price statistics, and allows the identification of all products available on the market that contain the characteristic researches. Thus, it's possible to compare price practice for coronary stents with different attributes. Now we are doing the same for pacemakers. We already defined the attributes of these products, and the next step is develop the panel and make it available to users can customize their searches. Based on financial impacts for SUS and health insurance plans, Anvisa decided that the next medical device to be monitored will be the defibrillators and the valve prostheses. It is a huge challenge to find agreement on a single definition of fair price and a bigger one of address strategies to achieve it. Health systems around the world have been struggling to reach a balance between affordability and needs. I believe that economic monitoring of medical device is an important step in this direction, and we intend to gradually add more products to price monitoring. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Cristiani. And before we transition to our next panelist, I just wish to again highlight how Anvisa as an agency has implemented good regulatory practices regarding price monitoring. when the request came from the Federal Tribunal of Accounts for Anvisa to do something, Anvisa employed good regulatory practices, conducted a regulatory impact assessment on price monitoring, and in that robust analysis, recognized the complexity of the medtech supply chain compared to medicines, that it did not currently have the budgeting, nor did it envision a time in the future with medical devices. And it really implemented the medical technology, the monitoring scheme, recognizing that it's the best application of public health resources given to Anvisa to help the but it could very well be the trend that happens in other countries. But and critical to its success is the respect that it has of the market competition rules from the antitrust authorities, and ensuring that the market is still working as a mechanism to keep the prices below. So again, kudos to Anvisa for their regulatory impact assessment and the implementation of GRP in the analysis of the system prior to its implementation, and count on our continuing support of its implementation. With that, I will turn now to Ben Wright of 3M Ventures. And Ben has been a colleague and really looking at the way that the medtech ecosystem is beyond the regulatory aspects and beyond the health specific aspects. There's investment, there's the broader ecosystem of innovation. And so, Ben, I wanted to invite you to kind of jump in on this topic and take the conversation in that direction to kind of round us out amongst all the topics that we teed up at the top. So over to you.
Thank you, Stephen, and happy birthday. Really honored and excited to be here. So as Stephen said, I'd like to talk a little bit about the broader ecosystem, innovation ecosystem, and also how the medtech industry can cooperate with corporations to really accelerate their efforts and growth. A little bit about 3M. If you don't know 3M, we're a diversified manufacturer, industrial manufacturer based in Minnesota. We have 4 main business lines. One is safety industrial products, which includes everything from respirators and personal protection products that are used in industrial manufacturing, to a lot of consumables, tapes and adhesives and abrasives that are used to build things. We also have a transportation electronics business that makes specified materials that goes into everything from the production of airplanes, like Embraer jets, to consumer electronics. And then we have a consumer business that has famous brands like Post-it and Scotch-Brite home cleaning products. And then finally, a fairly sizable healthcare business that provides a lot of products that to hospitals to help people either with infection prevention, wound care, healing, oral care products. So that's 3M. We have a large presence actually in Brazil. It's one of our most important subsidiaries. We have headquarters in Sao Paulo and manufacturing in Campinas and in places like Itapaninga. So one of the things that I've missed personally from COVID is not being able to travel to Brazil. I really enjoyed getting down there and meeting our colleagues. So it's great to at least connect with you here. A little bit about my group. So 3M Ventures is really the external innovation engine for 3M. And I'll get into a little bit about what that is. If you think about why does a company like 3M have an external innovation arm, it's really the recognition that the disruption is happening faster than ever before. We see disruption with technology and business models across every sector that 3M plays. We see in industrial manufacturing, robotics becoming a lot more prevalent. In the transportation industries, electric vehicles and autonomous vehicles are hitting the stage. And then in healthcare, there's a ton of innovation that's happening. Everything from the med device industry to digital health and AI. So, and what we've seen is that some of this innovation is happening in large companies like 3M and Medtronic, but a lot of it's actually happening in startups that are venture capital backed. So companies like 3M have actually jumped into the venture capital arena, and we've seen a large increase in groups like this in recent years. So 3M Ventures is really, we have two groups under my organization. One is a venture capital arm where we invest in outside companies. And we use that as a way to learn about new markets and new technologies, but also to as a vehicle to partner with outside companies and startups. And a lot of times startups and smaller companies struggle to find ways to partner with big companies. And so this is a way for us to kind of facilitate that partnership and create a mutual win for both parties. And then I also have an organization that's creating new businesses for 3M. The way we work is that we partner very closely with our businesses at 3M to understand their strategies, what are the gaps that they have in their portfolio, and then once we understand those gaps, we go out and find companies that could potentially fill those gaps. We have some great examples in our that we've done in the past already. So, for example, we partnered with a company here in the U.S. called AirViz that helped us create our first ever smart home product. So we created a home air filtration system, a filter that allowed you to monitor your filter life, and it would basically tell you when to change the filter. Well, that was our first entry into the smart home space, as I mentioned, and now we've taken that into other products like smart home room air purifiers. In the medical arena, we've partnered with companies. A couple examples. We invested in a company called Volano Vascular that had a novel blood draw technology, and we were able to partner with them because some of our Tegaderm tapes were perfect for securing the device. One of our recent successes is that we partnered with a company called Echo Devices. That's a California-based startup that developed a digital stethoscope that also used machine learning to help doctors identify heart conditions like heart arrhythmia. And so you may or may not know that 3M has one of the world-leading brand in stethoscopes. It's called the Littmann brand. And so we partnered with Echo and launched a Littmann version of their product this year. So that's a way that we partner. And so this can be a great opportunity for companies in Brazil to get connected with a bigger company like 3M. And I encourage you to look at other companies that may be of interest. A lot of the Minnesota Fortune 500 companies, most of them have venture arms. Medtronic, United Health Group, and even outside the medtech space in agriculture, companies like Cargill have venture arms. And these can be a great way for you to get connected with big companies, and also kind of for startups particularly to leverage the strengths of a corporation. I do want to say that it's important to realize that we look at a lot of companies before we choose to invest or partner with them. So don't get frustrated if you have something that you think is really unique and then it doesn't get much traction with a bigger company, because it really has to fit strategically, and there has to be that mutual value creation for this to be successful. But I think that the bottom line is that these groups can be a good way to partner with bigger companies, and I encourage you to think about this as you move forward. With that, Stephen, I'll maybe turn it back to you and hopefully get us a little bit more back on time.
Great. Thank you, Ben. Appreciate it. So now maybe just pulling everyone back together, I did receive I have some questions of my own, and I have some questions that have come in via WhatsApp. But maybe if you could all kind of get your pencils or pens and note some of the questions, I'll let you feel free to respond to the one that's most of interest to you. Glad to welcome Leandro. Glad to have you with us representing the third directorate in GGTPS from Anvisa. Thank you for joining the conversation. But some of the questions that have come in, I see one that what's in the chat section here. Maybe I'll direct this one to you, Leandro. It says, how does Anvisa envision the evolution for regulation for disrupting medtech that are not covered by current regulations? So I would say, what do you see as the future? What's coming up? What's coming up next for medtech? And we were very thankful to have you with us last week at the Medtech conference, but this is a different event this week. But if you could highlight for us some of your response to that, then I'll circle back to the questions for the other panelists.
Okay, so Stephen, first of all, happy birthday.
Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity. We really think that the big word on this is collaboration. Yeah, we need to have collaboration between companies in Anvisa and also from the academy. It's really important for everyone to stay closer in order to make the innovation to happen. With the COVID-19, we have a lot of innovation going on, and we needed to also innovate in the regulatory process in Anvisa. And to do that, we need to be in really close contact to other regulatory agencies and also to the company that develop new products. This is the collaboration is the big point on this. We really appreciate the international work, especially with the countries from IMDRF and also with WHO, when we are getting closer and closer. The challenges for Brazil are the same for the other countries. So we need to be together and try to find solution that fits for everyone.
And just following up on that, thank you, Leandro. Just following up on that and your remarks and that of Dr. Cristiani and your remarks last week, is that regulatory convergence and reliance are the name of the game. And we're appreciative of the information that Anvisa has relayed regarding not just the important work of the IMDRF, but also the use of relevant international standards as a basis for technical regulations, from ISO and IEC and others. Very important to that work. And that's very much aligned with the guidance from the WHO and PAHO and also the WTO. It's kind of a win-win, and it's a classic case of the implementation of good regulatory practices. So thank you for that. And maybe following on that thread of that same question, considering that COVID will be and other health emergencies will be with us, how do you all in the panel see the future regarding the elements that you've highlighted? And maybe just some of the questions. What have we learned in relation to the shortage of supply of medical devices and diagnostics? What's the role that you can each play in the next pandemic and emerging from this one, considering these lessons learned? And maybe what will be the role of Brazil in the new production arrangements that will be necessary in the future? How do we avoid being short of key or strategic raw materials? So I'm going to put these out there, maybe circle back to you, Dr. Gadelha, and get your inputs on that or other related questions or points you'd like to highlight. No, you're on mute. There we go.
Well, this experience of a big disruption brought by COVID-19 in all levels, economic, social, and environmental, it's a great opportunity to rethink all these questions that we are discussing. Certainly, we will have other pandemics. The questions of very important hazards will be coming. And the question of preparedness has to change of perspective. It's not possible, as I said before, just to react to the crisis and try to run and improvise answers to the threat of a new pandemic or a post-COVID world. We need to face the structural challenges. In the case, for instance, of our universal health care, it's a very generous setup. In the case, for instance, of vaccines, we distribute freely a very wide range of vaccines. But when we think of what we had at COVID, many times, the chain of supplies, even some very simple technological parts of what we needed, there were barriers. There was a difficulty in having this as a local production. The innovation in Brazil did not respond, to this challenge. So we have to think of structuring resilience in a much broader way. And also, as I said before, will be with a great challenge also of dealing with the emerging technologies. I think it was Ben or someone just mentioned this, and I'm very curious to hear from our colleagues how they are dealing with this in terms of connecting this disruption with the need for coordination of healthcare organizations and health systems.
Thank you, Dr. Gedalia. Maybe over to you, Trevor, for your reaction to some of that and thoughts and reaction to the question. And in the future, what's next? How can we get out of reactive and be more proactive for this and the next emergencies?
Well, look, I mean, I think there's some constructive ways. I mean, to your point, Paulo, I mean, I think, everything is going to be connected. If it wasn't connected before, it's going to be connected now. We were already starting down that path in our company. Even what I would consider to be, I call them dumb devices, which don't have any electronic components in them, such as spinal devices. Even then, I think this probably has meant 5 years. 5 years in terms of medical technology development. And it also has meant, things like medical education have been dramatically changed. Dramatically, and forever changed. And I call it the democratization of medical education. It's fantastic. I mean, I could say we've done some counting and how many doctors we've trained in different programs. Even over 2 years, 13 times more doctors we're reaching, 13 times. And we were already doing in the hundreds of thousands of trainings on a global basis already. So this is going to have a dramatic impact in so many ways. We already see it in our personal lives, but I think the medical technology business is completely transformed. This can be very different than pharmaceuticals. I'm not saying pharmaceuticals bad, we good. That's not where I'm going. But I think that medical technology is a whole different way of capitalizing on information technology to transform its impact. This is going to sound like a very basic question. Particularly, it's going to like a basic comment. And this is really not a comment for Brazil, but we are in a Brazil conference. Please understand, and for governments, even at the highest level around the world, to understand our industry for what our industry actually is, as opposed to who we are not. We're still dealing with all these issues, and particularly in the middle of a crisis, that we're not a pharmaceutical company. We have no relationship practically with the pharmaceutical industry. We're much more like an IT company, and because it has very direct consequences, right, for the regulatory pathway, the reimbursement pathway. And I know our friends at Anvisa know this so well, but we need your help and your diplomacy. Help explain these things. Even if people disagree with our decisions, you kind of want to know, what the dynamics are in the industry, even if you wanted to punish us, or if you want to incentivize us to do things differently. You have to know well the dynamics in the industry. And I just unfortunately think the wrong time to learn these things is in the middle of a crisis. And this is not a Brazil comment at all, because I really feel like this is well understood. But Brazil is a global force for good. So please help us. Please help us to explain those things. I think something, Stephen, that is often left out of this is that medical technology just doesn't do its own thing. There are human beings. There's doctors, nurses, operating teams all around that. And that the human element of technology has been left out of this discussion. And I know we all know that, because we know that in our families. We know that, a great, City Lebanese, all those great operations here at City Lebanese, it's not happening because you have these incredible doctors that are working day and night, and these nursing teams that are tired. They're exhausted everywhere. And how do we keep them motivated? How do we keep them incentivized? How do we keep them in their game so that their medical judgment, in such a difficult time for all of us is and I think that we're very much behind that. I mean, we can, on the slightly negative side, Stephen, I mean, look, countries put up a lot of barriers, all sorts of barriers. And by the way, I think that there's so many countries, and this is not necessarily, this is not a Brazil comment. This is a global comment. I would even say even in our country, we had some of those same barriers, right? And some of those were unintentional, some of those were intentional. The unintentional ones are the ones that we can, I think, get at a little bit more easily because they can be dealt with by education. When people put manufacturing stoppages in across the world, we had, for example, a large Asian country put what they call a movement control order on one of our electronics component suppliers. We were one day away from having a major stoppage of things that are really important for COVID-19. For decision makers to really understand that, to be sensitive to it. And I've actually called officially for an emergency convening mechanism at the WTO, where countries can get around a coffee table, strong coffee, please, and they'll talk about some of these things that are coming up, figure out where the problem is coming from, figure out if these can be resolved a little bit more quickly as opposed to over endless debate that frankly just cause lives. So that's it from my side. Yeah.
Thank you, Trevor. And Ben, maybe I can turn to you, not so much from a health policy perspective, but within the scope of work that you address in venture capital and the flexibility required and offered within the work that you do, is there anything there that could help the emergence from the current pandemic and can better prepare the US and Brazil and our partners from future health pandemics through venture capital in the medtech space?
Well, I think maybe building off of what Dr. D'Elia and Trevor said, this is a really, really interesting time in terms of the intersection of technology and healthcare. And I mean, you don't have to look any further than this conference call right now. I mean, prior to COVID, we wouldn't have been so ready to be on a video call. And a lot of the technology was there prior to COVID. We just never adopted it. And I see the same thing in the healthcare and the tech space. So a lot of the technology that's been developed for consumer electronics, software, and you look at some of the AI is really ready and ripe for disruption in healthcare. But as Trevor said, there's a lot of barriers to the implementation of that technology, and some of the barriers are important and needed, like the regulatory process to make sure we have safety and efficacy. But some of the barriers I believe are historic around the healthcare industry and how the business model is set up, whether that's in the US or in Brazil as well. And so to me, that'll be from a policy perspective, important for the healthcare industry to figure out. But from a technology and a VC space, it will happen. I mean, there are things, what we've seen advance in the venture space is anything remote health, remote monitoring. You see a lot of intersection between consumer electronics and patient monitoring, and also with some of the advances in genomics. If you combine that patient monitoring with advances in genomics and personalized medicine, you really can develop very personalized medicine that is tailored to the individual. So I think that this is a really interesting time that we live in, and it's an interesting time to be in the medtech space.
Thank you, Ben. And maybe I can adapt that question back to you, Leandro, bringing it full circle. We have already, the AdMed being part of the co-secretariat of the Global Medical Technology Alliance, is already working with Australia in the planning of their virtual hosting of the International Medical Device Regulators Forum. And we're looking at the related workshops we might have. And certainly resiliency during pandemic has been a key aspect of that. And we did a brief survey of the regulatory agencies that use digital and remote tools and remote inspection the most. And I think Anvisa topped the list. And as you additionally may know, that the Brazilian Medtech Alliance, ABIS, does a weekly compilation of the different Anvisa and other Brazilian measures that have been implemented to deal in a flexible way with COVID. And it's been remarkable how effective that's been. I wanted to maybe turn the question to you. What do you view as next? Not just the very helpful and key, the key collaboration between the sector and the agency, but what do you view as next, and what can the agency do or plan to do in order to prepare for future health pandemics from the regulatory aspect?
Okay. Thank you, Stephen, for your feedback and also for your question. It's really important for us to work on reliance. So for the future, we believe that the medical device single review process that is being, it's a project from IMDRF that we really plan to be together with IMDRF in order to make one device to get easier around the world, not only in Brazil, but also in other countries. We really think that global convergence is needed, not only for Brazil, but for all countries we have. It can be really important opportunities for good device to get inside of the Brazilian market, and also for Brazilian devices to get on international markets too. To find this goal, we need to promote, to change our regulatory environment in Brazil, having more convergence, implementing international documents in Brazil. So we are really working on the implementation of IMDRF documents in Brazil, and also trying to promote them in our continent. We were trying to promote the implementation of these documents in Mercosur, and it's been very well received by the countries. We hope to have a better environment for the medical device sector in the near future.
Thank you, Leandro. And I regret that we've reached the end of our time for this panel discussion. And although we can't continue the conversation today, we look forward to future opportunities, perhaps even as a part of this series and bringing it back. Medtech, the role that Brazil and the US and Minnesota have in this important space. So thank you all very much for the interesting and engaging discussion. And with that, I'm going to pass it back to Consul General Benoni. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this fascinating panel. Allow me to thank all partners and panelists, as well as our distinguished audience, for participating in this MedTech dialogue. I'm glad that we had the participation of Dr. Hélio Agnotti Neto, Secretary of Science, Technology, and Innovation at the Brazilian Health Ministry, Dr. Cristiane Gomes, Director of Anvisa, Leandro Pereira, also with Anvisa, Dr. Paulo Gadelha with Fiocruz. This event relied on the support of our friends at the Minnesota Trade Office. I should like to thank Gabrielle Gerbeau and Rachel Lyman for your partnership. Special thanks also to the Brazil-Minnesota Chamber of Commerce, in particular Jeffrey Hanson, President of the Chamber, Isabel Gomes, Director, Paula Cani, Director, and also Honorary Consul of Brazil in Minnesota. We are thankful for the support provided by Adriano Bonazio in the backstage and administration of the digital platform. I need to recognize the importance of the contribution to this debate by the representatives of the private sector in the panel, Dr. Trevor Gunn with Medtronic, and Ben Wright with 3M. Thank you so much. I congratulate Steve Bipes, Vice President at AdvaMed, for the great job he did as moderator, and also happy birthday, Stephen. We should give you the gift, but you gave us the gift today with your work as moderator. The idea of organizing a dialogue in MedTech with our American partners came to me when I met virtually Dr. Trevor Gunn last year, a few weeks after taking the helm at the consulate. I realized immediately that there is a huge potential to enhance cooperation, partnerships, joint ventures in this key sector. During the pandemic, it became even more evident that the whole MedTech supply chain is strategic. Leading American companies in this industry have plants in Brazil and Brazilian suppliers. It seemed to be natural that we take advantage of such integration to foster more business and partnership aimed at providing more opportunities for innovation, both in Brazil and in the US. Today's dialogue is just a first step. this is a kickoff of a much more ambitious project that should lead to the systematic effort to tap into the potential that exists. I hope next year we'll be able to organize an in-person event combining a seminar with business meetings, matchmaking, and technical visits. For that, we count on the support of the Brazilian Association of Medtech Industry, ABIMO, and the Trade Promotion and Investment Agency, APEX. So thank you once again, and stay tuned. Follow the consulate's social media for more information and events. I'll be seeing you soon again in another event. Thank you.